respectively. So we'll turn to these later, but first I want to start by applying Spence's logic. And the most famous application of Spence's logic is probably the product design model of hoteling. Yeah, Mohammed.
From the wrong people, do you
Yeah.
mean from social point of view or from profit-making point of view? Because from profit-making, if it's not a insurance industry, that it depends on what the type of people, any marginal profit is the same, even if they're...
Well, so for insurance is a good example. For platforms is another good example. And then there's other cases where endogenously you do care. So imagine that you're selling you're a grocery store, right? And you want the people who will buy a lot of stuff at your grocery store to come, right? Or you're a country, and you're trying to attract immigrants who will work really hard when they get here. You see what I mean? Yeah. But those are things where people aren't inherently different, but once you set your pricing strategy, then they do make them different, right? If you had no taxes, you wouldn't care about getting hardworking people. But once you have taxes, you want hardworking people, but still pay more taxes, right? Okay. So this is a classic example with horizontal single-peaked preferences. And it's part of a more general class of sort of spatial models that people look at. Okay. So the idea is that there's a store that can locate somewhere along a line, and consumers are uniformly distributed on this line, and they have to travel to go to the store. Consumers always buy one of two competing products, so it's not really technically a monopoly situation. It's actually a competitive situation, but you'll see the logic is very similar. So each firm is going to start somewhere on the line, and the question is, where do they move from wherever they start on the line? Does anyone want to say what Spence's logic would tell us about that? Yeah, for sure.
They would move in the middle because you're trying to go after the marginal.
Yeah, and the person who's going to be marginal is going to be halfway in between the two, right? Because people have to go to one or the other. Yeah, that's right, Rishak. Okay. So you always are going to move towards your competitor. And notice that this holds at every point. No matter where you are, you're always going to move towards your competitor. So you're going to have to wind up in equilibrium on the same spot, right? And the question is, where does this spot have to be? So here's sort of a picture. There's two stores. They're going to move towards the center. It has to be in the middle. Because imagine that it were somewhere other than the middle. Imagine that the two ended up together right here, right? Well, then this guy, if he just moved to the middle, could get all the people to that side and half of the people here, right? And so they're going to have to end up on top of each other in the middle of the beach, right? Okay. So in the simple model, both firms end up at the center. This is an extremely famous result, one of the most famous results in industrial organization. But notice that everyone would be better off, or not everyone would be better off, overwhelming majority of people would be better off if you had one firm at 0.25 and one firm at 0.75. Because then all the people who are at the ends of the beach would be much better off, right? And this is exactly the classic example of the Spence distortion, right? Because you're catering to the marginal consumers rather than to your inframarginal consumers, right? So this is very widely applied, and it's very relevant when there are geographic issues. It's often given as a reason why, say, lots of stores that would be better if they were spread out clustered together. It neglects the fact that there are other types of marginal consumers. So first of all, there might be people who are thinking about buying something, but also might not buy anything at all, right? So we assumed here that everyone was going to buy from one of the two stores. But if now there are some people who, if you get too far away from them, they won't buy at all, that's going to reduce the extent to which you just go to the center because you're worried about losing those people, right? And then, if that's the case, the key question is of whether, so under monopoly, firms would go to 0.25 and 0.75. So this is saying that competition actually makes things worse. But that's not necessarily the case if there might be people who might not buy anything at all, right? then it's not obvious whether monopoly or competition is going to be better, because it depends on whether the people who are potentially switching between the two firms or the people who are potentially exiting and not buying anything at all is more representative of the average consumer in the market. Spence tells us we always want to cater to that average consumer in the market, and instead firms cater to the marginal consumers. But the key is whether the marginal or the average consumer is more representative of the marginal switching for consumer or the marginal exiting consumer is more representative of the average consumer in the market. And this depends on whether the dimension that the firms are currently choosing is the main thing that makes their products different, right? So the key thing here is the only difference between the two firms was where they were on this line. And then, of course, the marginal people are going to be less representative of the average over here than is the people who might exit the market, right? Those exiters are almost certainly going to be more representative, and so we're going to want monopoly. But on the other hand, imagine that these firms are just fixed somewhere on the beach, and then they're choosing some non-price dimension of their product other than that, like some quality. Then the people who are just switching between them, as long as their preferences are not too correlated with where they are on the beach, right, are going to be much more representative of the average consumer in terms of how much they value the quality than is someone who's exiting the market, because they're going to be likely someone who puts less value on the quality. So the key question is the choice that we're considering the key dimension of differentiation, or is it something else? OK. So I think that this hoteling model provides sort of an interesting baseline way to think about things. But the Spence model is actually sort of a broader way to check to make sure we're not missing some important aspect of the problem. Okay. Perhaps the most common example of application of the hoteling line is to electoral competition in what's called the median voter theorem. And the idea is that there's a political spectrum from left to right. Two parties are competing, and everyone is going to vote. The question is just who they're going to vote for. So as a direct extension of Hoteling's logic, Mohammed, what does the median voter theorem say?
The median voter theorem says both of the candidates want to get the median voter.
Yeah.
So they're going to represent his value.
Yeah, so both candidates will choose to be at the very center of the political spectrum, the point to which there's 50% of people to either side, right? So it says both political parties adopt the position of the median voter who has an equal number of voters to the left and to the right of her. This is the most basic of all results in political science. Yeah, go ahead, James.
I was thinking one of the things that makes this very different from the hoteling example is the fact that you don't have this situation where it's less efficient because of the competition, because you can't have two stalls at 0.25 and 0.75, which both serve half the people.
Yeah, that's true. Though it's still not obvious that it's more efficient, because it depends on whether the median voter is representative of the average voter's preferences, and you really want to maximize the average voter's preferences. But anyway, yeah, for more on that, check out the Freakonomics blog today. I don't know if anyone looked at that today. OK, so in a two-party system, right, winner-takes-all system, this is exactly the conventional wisdom. The median voter theorem is a formalization, but this is just like the most conventional wisdom that you hear people talking about all the time when they explain why Romney is running to the center now. They say, well, why Romney's changing his positions, he's running to the center of the political spectrum, right? And during the primaries, he ran to the center of the Republican Party. So he was matching the median voter each time, right? And a subsidiary result is like the more political competition there is, the more centrist people will be. So if someone has an incumbency advantage or something else that makes it less competitive of the political spectrum, then you would expect less running to the center. And if it's more competitive, you'd expect more running to the center, right? So this all just follows from the same logic as before. Now, this is all very simplified, of course, though, and there's a more general logic behind it. So what do you guys think might be missing from the median voter model? Like, what other important aspects? Yeah, Dan.
Well, first off, not everyone votes, so sort of the
Yeah.
intensity of support matters.
Yeah.
get monetary support and people campaigning for you.
Absolutely.
You aren't catering to that middle person.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else anyone else think about something else that's missing? Yeah, for Shank.
Well, isn't it like the distribution of like voters doesn't have to be based on just like one particular dimension? Like
yeah,
in
that's a good point.
This idea, you have like 10%, 10% on each sort of line, and then the variety could be different.
Yeah. So one thing that's missing is that voters could be different in many different dimensions. People could differ on, there's socially conservative but fiscally liberal people, and there's fiscally liberal and socially conservative people, right? Sorry, yeah.
So when
Yeah,
you have
go ahead.
populist and libertarian,
Yeah.
Republican, Democrat, what happens actually when you have the
In the model?
two types of
Yeah. Well, that's what I was about to talk about. So, so the second issue is that not everyone votes, right? And Spence's logic shows us how to extend this, right? So in particular, let's answer Chrissy's question. Chrissy, why don't you answer your own question? What do you think?
Well, I don't
What does Spence logic tell us that people will do in terms of their positions?
If you've got two different if people are distributed over their opinions of, say, like.
Yeah, imagine we have this diamond. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this diamond. But this diamond has, socially conservative people. Social conservatism is in that direction. Economic conservatism is in this direction. And so you have like a social conservative and like libertarian and so forth. Imagine that,
So we need the density on both.
yeah, so here's the Republican Party, here's the Democratic Party. So what's going to define the positions that people take, according to the logic of Spence?
Well, you have to take an expectation on two variables.
You take the expectation along the set of what?
Well, along the set of the marginal.
Exactly.
So I guess you would just pick out the little amount of people that matter.
Yeah, so you think about what does the average swing voter think of the policy that I'm taking, right? So that's the more general version of the median voter theorem. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
So for the two-party case, even if you have multiple dimensions, doesn't it still reduce to the same, like who's closer to who? It's just that they're not, like the distribution is not as even. Right?
It does, absolutely. But you still have to think about this set of people. Now there's a multidimensional set of people who are along the boundary. There might be fiscally conservative but socially liberal people on the boundary, and also socially conservative and fiscally liberal people. I don't know if I'm saying the same thing again. What?
Like McCain kept talking about Joe the Plumber.
Joe the Plumber
He's a
was
random guy.
socially conservative but economically liberal, or was he the other way around? I don't remember what he was.
I mean,
Anyway.
he represented Republican something or other.
Yeah.
Like some swing voter that
Yeah.
would ideally go for Republican, and that's all John
Yeah.
McCain could talk about because he came from a swing state.
Yeah. So I mean, like some swing voters are like probably a lot of people in the economics department at the University of Chicago who are probably socially liberal and fiscally conservative. Other people are like, the guns and religion, people in the middle of the country who probably also belong to a union, right? And the country always needs to, candidates are always thinking, those people have completely diametrically opposed preferences, and they have to take an average over the set of swing voters to like calculate where to put their positions, right? Yeah.
Like, why not the median of swing voters, and what's the difference between like swing voters and like when we're talking about swing voters,
Yeah.
are we assuming that like the two group of voters that have like fixed votes and only these people can change their mind? If that's the case, then still we want to like.
Well, I mean, it's just like that. It's just like this. It's like if I'm here and the Republicans are here and the Democrats are there, you